When he moved the small silver-framed picture of us from his bedside table to the back of his sock drawer, I knew the foundation of my life had finally turned to dust. It wasn't the sound of the front door closing, not anymore. It used to be. For 2 years, the sound of the lock turning at 10:30 p.m. or sometimes midnight was the most consistent thing in my marriage. Every night, the same faint metallic click would tell me that Mark was home from the late shift, the one he said was essential to securing his future at Ascend Global, the corporate giant that had swallowed his life whole. It felt like he was running a marathon, and I was the lonely spectator holding a water bottle he rarely reached for. I remember that evening vividly. The air in our house, usually thick with the scent of pine and rosemary from my cooking, felt thin and sterile. I had made his favorite, slow-braised lamb with mint, something that always brought a faint, genuine smile to his face in the early days. He arrived home at 11:47 p.m. I heard the car pull into the driveway, the familiar crunch of the gravel, and then the door. He didn't greet me, which wasn't unusual. He just walked straight to the kitchen, his tie loosened, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. He said he'd already eaten a late desk dinner. "Mark," I said, my voice quiet, standing by the counter where I'd left his untouched plate. "You haven't eaten properly at home in 2 weeks. It's lamb." He barely glanced at me. His eyes were tired, yes, but there was something else in them. A flatness like a landscape that had been drained of all color. "I'm sorry, Eliza. I told you. The Jensen account is killing us. I just need to shower and sleep." I watched him drop his briefcase next to the door. It was a new, expensive leather briefcase, a gift from his boss, Mr. Harrison, the CEO of Ascend Global. He was climbing, all right. Every promotion, every raise, was a new lock on a door he was closing between us. The suspicion had been slow, insidious. It wasn't the late nights themselves. It was the shift in the details. The old Mark, the one I married, smelled like his day, a faint mix of city pollution and cheap office coffee. The new Mark smelled subtly different. Once I caught a hint of gardenia, a soft, feminine, and expensive perfume that definitely wasn't mine. "You smell nice," I commented one morning, leaning in as he knotted his tie. He stiffened, pulling back slightly. "It's the new air purifier in the conference room. Puts out some scent." I told them it was ridiculous. I didn't press it, but the seed of doubt had been planted, deep and cold. Then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday late afternoon. I was folding laundry, the sound of the dryer a comforting white noise. His company phone, which he never left at home, began buzzing loudly on the counter. The screen lit up with a name that made my blood run cold. Lydia Harrison. Lydia Harrison, the CEO's wife. I picked it up on the third buzz, a tremor in my hand. I hadn't meant to, but my reflex took over. A woman's voice, smooth and slightly husky, answered, "Sweetheart, did you get the tickets? My flight's delayed, but I'll see you in Dallas tomorrow. Tell Eliza something." There was a pause, a small knowing chuckle. "No, don't tell Eliza anything. Just tell her you love her. See you soon, darling." The line went dead. I stood there, the scent of fresh laundry suddenly overwhelming and sickly sweet. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt a slow, deliberate freezing, the way water turns to ice under immense, quiet pressure. Dallas. He had told me he was flying to Chicago for a critical, high-stakes finance summit. The lie was massive, yet so carelessly constructed. He had been planning to be with Lydia Harrison, the beautiful, bored wife of the powerful CEO Charles Harrison. He wasn't working late for our future. He was working late to create theirs. I walked into the bedroom. Mark's side of the closet was orderly but sparse. That's when I noticed the space on his nightstand and discovered the photo tucked away in the sock drawer. It wasn't the picture I was concerned with. It was the lack of respect for the memory it represented. It was an explicit, calculated action of dismissal. That was the exact moment I realized my life wasn't just collapsing. It was being meticulously disassembled by the man who had promised to build it with me. I wasn't going to have a dramatic outburst. I wasn't going to weep and beg. I was going to call the only person who could give me the perspective and the strength I needed. I walked to the living room, picked up my personal phone, and dialed the number of the one person who knew the cold, complex logic of corporate Washington better than anyone. My old friend, Diana. I knew exactly who to call first, and it wasn't a lawyer. Diana answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and no nonsense, even across 2 time zones. She was a corporate lawyer in New York, specializing in high-profile separations and intellectual property. A woman who dealt in facts, not feelings. That's exactly what I needed. "Eliza, this is early for you. Everything all right?" she asked. I took a deep breath, the scent of the mint and lamb still heavy in the cold kitchen air. "Mark left his phone at home, Diana." I picked up a call from Lydia Harrison. "They're going to Dallas tomorrow." She called him sweetheart and told him to tell me something. then decided not to bother. The silence on the other end was momentary, but heavy with understanding. Diana knew the names. She knew Ascend Global. She certainly knew Charles Harrison, the CEO, a man whose name was synonymous with ruthless power in the industry. Lydia Harrison, Diana repeated, her voice dropping. Charles Harrison's wife. That's audacious even for Mark. I appreciated her lack of pity. Audacious doesn't cover it. Destructive does. I need your advice not as a lawyer right now but as a strategist. I'm not doing the crying wife routine. I'm not going to storm his office or key her car. I want him to regret that phone call more than anything he's ever done. Good, she said. Vengeance is a dish best served in the form of a detailed, documented, and highly legal paper trail. But we can't just go after the infidelity. That's emotional damage. Messy and hard to quantify. We go after the motive. The motive? I asked, pulling a chair out and sitting down, suddenly feeling the exhaustion settle deep in my bones. Ascend Global is a publicly traded company, Eliza. Charles Harrison is a high-profile, high-stakes personality. His wife running off with his high-potential VP, Mark, is a massive professional liability. But it's worse than that. Why would Mark risk everything for her? Sex, yes. But usually in these corporate dramas, the sex is a side effect of the power dynamic. Mark needed something from Lydia, or more likely from Charles Harrison. Diana's cool logic was like a tourniquet on my spiraling emotion. She advised me to do two things immediately. Do not confront him and start looking at the finances. The moment you confront him, you lose the element of surprise. Diana explained. He'll get nervous, delete everything and lock down the accounts. Let him go to Dallas. Let him believe he's gotten away with the perfect escape. In the meantime, you become the ghost in his machine. I spent the next 3 days in a fog of quiet, focused activity. Mark left early the next morning for his Chicago summit. He kissed me lightly on the forehead, the touch devoid of feeling, and told me he'd call when he landed. He never did. While he was gone, I accessed the financial records. Our marriage hadn't been an open book policy for years. Mark handled the investments, the bank accounts, and the joint savings. I ran the house, the emotional side of our life. The initial glance showed nothing overtly missing, but there was a pattern of irregular, large transfers. 5 transactions over the last 9 months, all exactly $25,000 each, totaling $125,000. They were labeled cryptically, Jensen A. Setup, Vendor Fee, Consulting Retainer. Each transfer went to the same unlisted LLC account, Phoenix Capital Solutions. I sent the LLC details to Diana. Within hours she called back. This is good, Eliza. Very good. Phoenix Capital Solutions is a shell company. It was set up less than a year ago, right when Mark got his latest promotion under Charles Harrison. She paused. And the director of that LLC is a man named Robert Laskin. The name didn't ring a bell. Who is Robert Laskin? He's a former senior accounting manager at Ascend Global. He was quietly let go last year after an internal investigation into suspicious vendor payments. The official line was early retirement, but the Whisper Network said he was Harrison's golden boy who took the fall for something bigger. He vanished. My mind raced. Mark was sending $125,000 to a man Charles Harrison had supposedly fired for financial misconduct. And now Mark was sleeping with Harrison's wife. The lines of betrayal were starting to intersect, not just in my personal life, but in the corporate world Mark lived in. Mark isn't just cheating, Diana, I said, a terrifying clarity settling over me. He's either paying hush money, or he's paying into a black market network that Charles Harrison set up. He's not running away with Lydia. He's running into a legal and financial hurricane. Diana agreed. This changes everything, Eliza. This isn't divorce. This is corporate espionage with a romantic twist. We pivot. We get proof of the illicit money transfers and the affair. And we deliver the package to the only person who can truly detonate both their lives, Charles Harrison. I hung up the phone. The house was utterly silent, but inside me, the quiet hum of methodical planning had begun. I found Mark's corporate laptop hidden deep in his golf bag, something he used only for special projects. I looked at the dark screen, wondering if the secret documents were worth the destruction of my old life. I knew the answer was yes. Mark's corporate laptop, a sleek machine encased in brushed aluminum, felt heavy and cold beneath my fingers. I took it to the kitchen counter, the same place where I'd left the untouched lamb, and plugged it in. The password, thankfully, was still the same one he'd used for years. A variation of the name of our first dog, Barnaby. He was so predictable in his affection and so utterly reckless in his deception. I spent the next 48 hours submerged in Mark's digital life. I was no tech genius, but Diana had guided me, explaining where executives usually hid their trail. I was searching for the intersection between Lydia Harrison and Phoenix Capital Solutions. The first, and most painful, proof was simple and purely emotional. Hidden in a subfolder labeled Old Sales Reports were hundreds of photographs, not just pictures of Dallas, though there were plenty of those showing Mark and Lydia laughing on hotel balconies and sharing glasses of wine, but intimate, sickeningly happy snapshots spanning the better part of a year. They weren't just an affair. They were a parallel life. I saw them at a small cabin up north, a place Mark claimed he visited for solo hiking trips to clear his head. The sight of her hand resting carelessly on his knee in front of a crackling fire felt like a physical blow. I printed them all, silently, one sheet at a time, until the dining table was covered in glossy, undeniable evidence. Then I focused on the corporate dirt. I knew the real leverage wasn't the affair. It was the financial misconduct linking Mark to Charles Harrison's former accountant, Robert Laskin. I found the files deep within a secure cloud folder, protected by yet another layer of password protection. They weren't standard sales reports. They were susceptible internal communications regarding Ascend Global's bid for a significant federal contract. The Jensen account Mark was always working late on. The communications revealed that the $125,000 Mark had funneled to Phoenix Capital Solutions wasn't a vendor fee. It was a structured payment to Robert Laskin. Laskin, the fired accountant, was actually a key architect in rigging the financial projections for the Jensen account bid. The payments were a combination of hush money and consulting fees to ensure the bid documents were clean and passed government regulatory scrutiny, a delicate, illegal maneuver known as massaging the numbers. The email thread was damning. It wasn't just Mark. The instructions and approval came directly from Charles Harrison's executive assistant, a woman named Beverly who signed off on every payment plan, referring to it as the Barnaby Protocol, a cruel echo of the password that gave me access. I put together two distinct, meticulously organized packages. Package A, the emotional bomb. This was a large manila envelope containing all the photographs of Mark and Lydia, the Dallas boarding passes, which I found printed, tucked into his travel wallet, and the transcript of Lydia's sweetheart phone call. Package B, the corporate nuke. This contained the printed financial transaction records, the bank wire receipts, the email chains referencing the Barnaby Protocol, and a simple flowchart Diana had designed, illustrating the connection between the Jensen account bid, Mark's payments, Robert Laskin's shell company, Phoenix Capital Solutions, and Charles Harrison's office. I looked at the two envelopes. Package A would ruin my husband. Package B would destroy my husband and the most powerful man in his world. Mark returned late that Friday night. He looked tired but satisfied, with the faint scent of that expensive gardenia clinging to his suit jacket. The summit was intense, he lied, dropping his new briefcase heavily by the door. We won the Jensen bid. It was huge. Now I can finally relax. He looked at me, maybe seeing the stiffness in my posture, the cold clarity in my eyes. What's wrong, Eliza? I walked over to the kitchen counter, picked up package A, and placed it gently between us. Then I picked up package B, held it tight in my hand, and looked him straight in the eye. Nothing, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the earthquake inside me. Just paperwork. I think you might want to look at the paperwork from your trip. He glanced down at the envelope, saw Lydia's face staring back, and went instantly pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He reached for the photos, but I stopped him with a single word. Don't. The time for denying it is over. The time for talking is past. I just want to know one thing, Mark. When you were with her, were you doing it because you loved her or because you needed a clean path to Charles Harrison? He crumpled, sinking into a kitchen chair. Was complicated, Eliza. You don't understand the pressure. I understand all of it, I interrupted, tapping the folder I still held. And because I understand all of it, I get to choose where this story ends. Mark's face was a study in pure, unadulterated fear. It was a mask I had never seen on him before. Not the stress of a deadline, not the anger of a failed negotiation, but the primal dread of exposure. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was scared of losing Ascend Global. He stood up, his hand hovering over the envelope containing the photos. Eliza, you don't understand what you're holding. The infidelity is bad, I know, but that's personal. This, he gestured wildly toward the closed folder in my hand, that's business. If Charles Harrison thinks I've been digging into the Jensen account after we won the bid, he'll destroy me. You can't tell him. Oh, I'm not going to tell him, Mark, I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips. I'm not the right person for that particular task. But you're right, I don't care about the cheating anymore. That's just a sad side note. I care about the fact that you risked our entire financial stability, the money we worked for, the security of our retirement, on a massive, illegal corporate gamble just for a chance to climb higher. I placed the second, heavier folder, Package B, the corporate nuke, on the counter next to the pictures. Made a solid, heavy thud. "This is how this is going to work," I continued, speaking in slow, measured tones like dictating a contract. "You're going to give me full access to all joint accounts. You're going to sign over the title to this house, our only major asset, free and clear to me. You will walk away from Ascend Global. You will resign effective immediately, citing personal family emergency. If you do this quietly, I will give you a separate envelope containing only the infidelity proofs, and I will keep this second folder, the documentation of the Barnaby Protocol, private. We will manage this divorce discreetly." He stared at the second folder, his eyes wide. "You want me to walk away from everything? My career, the Jensen account success. You walked away from everything the moment you paid $25,000 to Robert Laskin to manipulate a bid. You just didn't realize it yet. Your career is already over, Mark. It's just a matter of who detonates the bomb, you or the SEC, after I send this package to them." The power shift in the room was palpable. His defiance crumbled. He was a corporate animal and I was holding his leash. He spent another hour pleading, trying to negotiate terms, promising to end the affair. I remained immovable. The trust was already pulverized. "You have 24 hours to comply with my terms. After that, I make the first call." I finished, picking up my phone and walking to the living room. "And Mark, I'm calling a victim, not a government agency." The next morning, the separation agreement documents were signed digitally, and the house title transfer process was started. Mark, broken, gave me the access codes and keys I needed and left for a hotel downtown. The house was mine, but the quiet was deafening. I felt no triumph, only a deep, weary resolution. Now for the quiet revenge. I put on my best silk blouse, fixed my hair, and poured myself a cup of Earl Grey tea, the familiar ritual giving me a sense of normalcy. Then I found the most critical number Diana had given me, Charles Harrison's private, personal cell phone. I waited until exactly 10 a.m., the time when a powerful CEO would have finished his initial staff briefing and settled into the real work of the day. My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed. It wasn't fear. It was the gravity of the decision. I was about to set a fire that would consume not only Mark but also Charles Harrison's entire corporate image and family structure. The call went through on the first ring. A deep, gravelly voice answered. "Harrison, Mr. Harrison," I said, keeping my voice low and level, projecting calm confidence. "My name is Eliza Peterson. I am, or was, Mark Peterson's wife. I need 5 minutes of your time face to face to discuss a serious and pressing issue concerning your vice president and, more importantly, your wife, Lydia." There was a long, cold pause on the line. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his CEO's brain. "I don't know what games you're playing, Mrs. Peterson. I'm busy. Call my secretary." "This can't go through your secretary, Mr. Harrison. It concerns a financial protocol you implemented that my husband referred to as Barnaby, and it concerns your wife's recent trip to Dallas with him. This conversation involves potential fraud and public humiliation. You decide if that's a topic for Beverly to handle." The protocol's name cut through his composure like ice. The air was sucked out of the line. "Where are you?" he demanded, his voice now flat, dangerous, and entirely focused. "I'm at my home in the suburbs. I suggest you come alone. I have 2 folders for you. One is about Lydia. The other is about Ascend Global. And you get to choose which one the SEC sees first." He hung up without another word. I walked to the front window, pulled back the curtain, and waited for the powerful, desperate man to come and pay the price for his wife's indiscretion and his own corporate malfeasance. The revenge wasn't loud. It was the quiet, dignified sound of truth. It took Charles Harrison exactly 45 minutes to arrive. When his black tinted window sedan pulled sharply into my quiet, tree-lined street, it looked like a predator entering a suburban sanctuary. He didn't park politely. He pulled right up onto the edge of my lawn, a gesture of careless power and urgency. He was exactly as he appeared in business magazines. Impeccably tailored, silver-haired, radiating an intimidating, controlled energy. He walked up the short pathway, his expensive leather shoes clicking on the flagstones, and didn't bother to knock. He stared through the window, waiting for me to unlock the door. When I opened it, I didn't invite him in. I stepped onto the porch, letting the late morning sun illuminate his face, forcing him to meet my gaze without the corporate shield of his office. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, a stark contrast to the impending destruction. "Mrs. Peterson," he stated, his voice a low, hard rumble. "I don't play games. Get to the point. What is this nonsense about Lydia and some internal protocol?" I didn't flinch. I held both manila envelopes tightly against my chest. "It's not nonsense, Mr. Harrison. It's the truth, and it's the end of several things. I have two packages here. Package A is your marriage. Package B is your company's integrity. I extended the first envelope, the thinner one filled with the photos of Mark and Lydia. He snatched it, his movements quick and violent. He didn't need to open it entirely. The edge of a glossy, sun-drenched photo of his wife laughing in my husband's arms was visible. His face didn't register shock or sadness. It registered rage. The cold, focused rage of a man whose property had been defaced. This is leverage, he spat, tossing the envelope back toward me, letting it flutter to the porch floor. A tawdry little affair. I can buy silence, Mrs. Peterson. What is your number? What is the price to make this go away and for Mark to disappear? You misunderstand me completely, I replied, feeling a spike of pure, righteous certainty. I don't want your money. I want justice. I want Mark to face the consequence for his gross betrayal of our trust. And I want you to understand the depth of the corporate liability he has created. I bent down, retrieved the photos, and then held out the second, thicker folder, Package B. This is why I called you, Mr. Harrison. Not to tell you your wife is cheating. You can divorce her. This is to tell you that Mark wasn't sleeping with her for love. He was doing it for proximity. He needed to be close enough to your office to execute your little fraud scheme. He took the second folder with reluctant hesitation, as he quickly skimmed the flowchart Diana had prepared, linking the $125,000 Robert Laskin Phoenix Capital Solutions and the Jensen account. The arrogance drained from his face. The color that had left Mark's cheeks the previous night now drained from Charles Harrison's. The Barnaby Protocol, he muttered, his voice barely audible. How did you get this? The same way you hid it, Mr. Harrison, I said calmly. Carelessness. My husband's password was the name of our dog, and your executive assistant used that name to sign off on a felony. Mark is a fool. He thought he was untouchable because he was sleeping with your wife. I gave him a moment to absorb the truth. His powerful corporate empire was tied to a man who was having an affair with his wife. The scandal was perfectly symmetrical. Mark Peterson resigned this morning, effective immediately, I informed him. He will take full financial responsibility for the transfers to Robert Laskin. I have his signed admission of guilt regarding the transfers. If you want to keep the Jensen account clean, and if you want to avoid an internal investigation that will destroy your stock price and bring your name into a federal fraud inquiry, you need to use those signed documents to lay the entire blame on Mark. Harrison looked from the folder to me, his eyes now narrowed, calculating. You're offering me my out, but you're sacrificing your husband. I am sacrificing a man who had already sacrificed me, my marriage, and our future for a few illegal stock options and a weekend in Dallas. I am ensuring that I walk away with my dignity and my home, and that Mark walks away with the consequences of his ambition. You, sir, get to save your company. He tucked the folder under his arm. Your terms, Mrs. Peterson? My terms are already met with Mark. Your terms are silence. You will ensure that Mark Peterson is immediately and publicly terminated for gross financial misconduct. You will make sure that the divorce settlement is swift and financially punitive to him. And you will never, ever mention my name in connection with the Barnaby Protocol again. I am not a threat, Mr. Harrison. I am the cleanup crew. Charles Harrison looked at the pristine, ordinary suburb around him, then back at me, a woman in a simple silk blouse, who had just offered him the legal blueprint for corporate survival. He gave a curt nod. Consider it done, Eliza Peterson. You have leverage and you used it well. I hope you find the peace you're looking for. He turned sharply, got back into his black sedan and sped away, kicking up gravel on the street. The moment he was gone, I felt the adrenaline crash, leaving me shaking but fiercely intact. My part was over. The public consequence was about to begin. The public consequences began not with a bang but with a cold, corporate memo. 3 days after Charles Harrison left my porch, I saw the headline on the business news ticker while waiting in line at the grocery store. Ascend Global VP Mark Peterson terminated amidst financial misconduct investigation. The article was clinical. It detailed Mark's swift removal, citing gross negligence in fiduciary duty and unauthorized payments to an unlisted third-party consultant, Robert Laskin, related to the newly acquired Jensen account. Harrison had done precisely what I demanded. He had thrown Mark under the bus to save the company's integrity and, more importantly, his own reputation. The quiet, calculated nature of the justice was far more satisfying than any screaming match could have been. I didn't have to lift a finger in the public arena. I provided the leverage and the power structure did the rest of the dirty work. My phone rang the moment I got back to the house. It was Diana. "It's done, Eliza," she confirmed, her voice tight with professional satisfaction. "The internal investigation will pin the Laskin payments squarely on Mark, painting him as the ambitious, rogue VP who circumvented protocol." The stock barely wavered. "Harrison is clean and Mark is toxic. And Lydia?" I asked, thinking of the woman who had happily played house with my husband while telling me to my face that he was stuck in boring meetings. "Lydia has vanished," Diana said. "Harrison has filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, but the rumor mill at Ascend is churning. Everyone knows the affair happened. The corporate chatter is electric. But because Harrison framed Mark as the sole architect of the fraud, Lydia is merely the CEO's wronged, albeit flighty wife whose infidelity provided the opportunity for Mark's financial deception. Harrison wins the moral narrative even with a cheating wife." I shook my head slowly, gazing out the window at the same porch where I had engineered the outcome. "It's a disgusting game, but at least the rules of consequence were finally applied to him." Mark called me that evening from his downtown hotel room. He didn't scream or accuse. He was strangely subdued, a broken man coming to terms with the magnitude of his downfall. "Eliza, I saw the news," he said, his voice flat, hollowed out. "They ruined me. They framed me as the lone wolf. Laskin is cooperating and pointing at me. Everything is gone. My future, the reputation I spent 20 years building. It was gone the moment you made your first payment to Laskin, Mark," I corrected him gently. "And it was gone the moment you put Lydia on the phone to call you sweetheart. You traded honesty for ambition. You thought you could have both, the security of home and the thrill of the corner office. The universe just corrected the balance." He tried to ask about the other folder, the corporate dirt that could have implicated Harrison. "You don't need to worry about that folder anymore," I told him. "It served its purpose. It was the only shield I had left. Now you need to focus on signing the final divorce papers. I want a clean break, and I want you to remember that your career was destroyed not because I was vengeful, but because you committed a felony." His last attempt was a plea for pity. "I don't even have enough liquid cash for an apartment, Eliza. I'm starting from zero." "Zero is where you should have started after the divorce, Mark," I said. "It's not my job to provide your soft landing. It's my job to secure mine." I hung up, feeling a profound sense of closure. My action was not about malice. It was about dignity. I didn't swap his lube for glue or slash his tires. I gave the two influential, careless people who betrayed me precisely what they deserved, the natural consequence of their documented actions. I used their own corporate ruthlessness against them. The quiet of the house no longer felt deafening. It felt peaceful. The divorce was finalized quickly. I kept the house, all the retirement funds, and every ounce of my self-respect. Mark was last seen accepting a low-paying consultancy job overseas, the Ascend Global scandal having effectively blocked him from corporate America. Lydia Harrison, stripped of her husband's immense wealth, faded back into the anonymity of the ultra-rich, her reputation forever tarnished by the affair. My life was stripped down to its essentials. My house, my garden, my sanity. I felt a weight lift, the crushing weight of pretense and forced affection. I started going to ceramics classes, the cool clay a soothing contrast to the sharp edges of the past. The moral of the story was simple, and it was reflected in the smooth, simple bowl I shaped with my hands. Part 7. The Resolution, Healing, and Final Lesson. The year that followed felt like rebuilding a beautiful old structure, not tearing one down. I changed the locks, repainted the main bedroom in a light, calming blue, and slowly, deliberately, began to fill the quiet spaces with things that were purely mine. The absence of Mark and the lack of the constant corporate tension he brought home allowed me to rediscover my own center. I remembered that before I was Mark's wife, I was Eliza, a woman who loved the smell of damp earth and who found solace in the simple rhythm of her own breathing. I never spoke about the corporate documents or my call with Charles Harrison again. The silence was my final, most excellent protection. It meant the power remained with me. I held the secret, and by having it, I controlled the narrative of my healing. One afternoon, I was working in the garden, pruning an overgrown rose bush, when my neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn, a wise, kind woman who had been a quiet pillar of support, came over with a glass of lemonade. She sat down on the porch swing and watched me work. "You look different, Eliza," she said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Lighter, like you finally put down a heavy suitcase you've been carrying for too long." I leaned on the pruning shears and smiled. "It was a hefty suitcase, Evelyn, full of things that weren't mine to carry." "Betrayal is always heavy," she agreed softly. "It's like holding on to a shard of glass. You think you're holding it to hurt the person who gave it to you, but all it does is cut your own hand." "I'm not holding the glass anymore," I replied. I gave it back. I found out that the only way to get true justice wasn't to fight him on my emotional level, but to use the truth against him on his level, the corporate transactional level. His greed and dishonesty were my ultimate weapon, not my tears. I realized then that the proper redemption wasn't in Mark's ruin, but in my own empowerment. I hadn't succumbed to the role of the victim. I had used my intellect, my quiet observation, and my emotional sobriety to navigate a chaotic situation and emerge whole. I secured my financial future, not with petty revenge, but with undeniable corporate leverage. I learned that betrayal doesn't define you. Your reaction to it does. Mark's actions reflected his own shallow ambition. My response reflected my inherent worth. I didn't need a husband to complete my story. I just needed the courage to edit out the dishonest chapter and start writing a new one. I sold Mark's expensive and used golf clubs and donated his overly ambitious suits. The symbolic clearing of space felt wonderful. I invested the money from the divorce settlement wisely, following the advice of a genuine, reputable financial planner that Diana recommended. The best revenge I found was not in seeing someone else suffer, but in seeing yourself thrive in their absence. The final piece of healing came when I thought about the other woman, Lydia. She lost her powerful husband, her gilded life, and her standing in her social circle, all because she chose to play a reckless game with an ambitious subordinate. I felt no pity but a sense of profound clarity. We were all just players in a high-stakes drama, and some of us chose to value money, while others decided to value truth. I was grateful I chose the latter. Life doesn't consistently deliver justice in a dramatic, shouting courtroom scene. Sometimes, justice is delivered quietly, meticulously, through the careful application of facts and the courage to make a cold, hard choice. When Mark left me for his boss's wife, he thought he had won the power game. He thought I would break down, that I would be the cliché of the heartbroken wife. But I realized that the true power lay not in the confrontation but in the information, the corporate secrets and the financial betrayals he carelessly exposed. I was betrayed by my husband and by his lover, but I was ultimately saved by my own discipline and the dignity I maintained throughout the process. I traded a painful marriage for peace, pretense for honesty, and sorrow for strength. The most important lesson? When someone shows you who they are, believe them and use that knowledge to protect yourself, not to destroy them. Let the truth do the heavy lifting. If you had found that folder of corporate secrets and knew that revealing it was the only way to secure your future and get justice for the betrayal, would you have made that call to the CEO? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and join our community. Your support helps us continue to share these quiet tales of reckoning and redemption.